Before we get into today's story, I want to let you know this is part one of 2 episodes. We're doing something a little different this week. The story we're telling is too good to rush, so we're carrying it into Friday. If you're listening to this on Thursday, come back tomorrow. If you're finding this later, part 2 is right there waiting for you. Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a 2-part story about business and how this entire story changed everything. The cottage at Mount McGregor, New York is quiet in the early morning of July 23rd, 1885. A man sits in a chair near the window, wrapped against a chill that seems to come from somewhere inside him rather than the summer air outside. He can't speak above a whisper. He can't eat without pain. He can't walk without help. The cancer that has been taking him for months has done its work thoroughly and without mercy. He has been writing for nearly a year through pain that most men would have used as permission to stop. He has been writing. He finished the last pages 5 days ago. Now he sits, and the people who love him sit nearby. And outside the cottage, the summer morning goes about its business as if nothing of consequence is happening here. He is 63 years old. 20 years earlier, the most powerful army on earth had surrendered to him in a farmhouse parlor in the courthouse in Appomattox, Virginia, and the country had gone half mad with relief and gratitude. Now he is dying in a borrowed house with almost nothing to his name. And the question of what his wife will live on after he is gone has been the engine driving every page he has written. So how does the man who saved the Union end up with $80 in his pocket and a borrowed roof over his head? How does the most trusted name in America become the instrument of its own financial destruction? And what does that all have to do with July 23rd, 1885, when Ulysses S. Grant died in a chair at Mount McGregor, New York, leaving behind a mystery that will take us 2 full episodes to answer. From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, July 23rd, that story takes us to 1885, the man who lost everything except the war. Ulysses S. Grant was not built for peacetime commerce. The record before the Civil War makes this plain enough. A farm in Missouri that failed, a debt-collecting job he quit, a real estate venture that went nowhere, and finally a position as a clerk in his younger brother's leather goods store in Galena, Illinois, where he worked under men who had once reported to him. He was 38 years old, a West Point graduate and Mexican-American War veteran, sorting hides and keeping accounts for his family's business because nothing else had come together. He was not a failure exactly. He was simply a man whose particular gifts had no obvious peacetime application. The war changed everything, and the end of the war changed it again. Grant emerged from Appomattox Courthouse as the most celebrated American alive, a general who had held the Union together through 4 years of grinding, bloody attrition. The country expressed its gratitude in the most direct way it knew. It made him president, twice, and showered him with gifts ranging from houses to racehorses to thousands of cigars from strangers who simply wanted to be connected to the man who had saved the Republic. He served 2 terms between 1869 and 1877, traveled the world on a tour that treated him as a visiting head of state everywhere he went, and returned to New York City in 1880 with a famous name, a celebrated wife named Julia, and no reliable income. There was no presidential pension in 1880. There was no government safety net for former commanders. There was only the name, and the name was worth something. In New York City, that was enough to attract people who understand exactly how to use it. Grant believed that the man who understood how to use his name best was a man by the name of Ferdinand Ward. Ward was charming, fluent in the language of Gilded Age finance, and possessed a reputation in New York City investment circles built almost entirely on promises of extraordinary returns. He came to Grant through Grant's son, Ulysses S. Grant Jr., known as Buck, who had gone into business with Ward and invited his father to join the firm as a full partner. With all of that in mind, Grant Sr. contributed $100,000 and, far more valuably, his name. The firm was called Grant and Ward, and the name alone brought investors through the door. But here's the thing. Ward's operation was not a legitimate investment firm. It was what would later be called a Ponzi scheme, though that term wouldn't exist for another generation. Money from new investors paying returns to earlier ones, with Ward extracting large sums for his own use throughout. He claimed access to lucrative government contracts and reported returns that seemed extraordinary. Grant did not manage the daily operations and trusted the numbers he was given, believing that the family's financial future was finally secure. On May 4, 1884, Ward arrived at Grant's Manhattan townhouse and said the firm needed $150,000 by Monday morning to cover a temporary shortfall. Grant, trusting the man completely, went that same afternoon to his neighbor, William Vanderbilt, the railroad magnate and one of the wealthiest men in America. Vanderbilt made the loan as a personal favor, telling Grant directly that he had no faith in the firm, but every faith in the man. Ward took the money and disappeared. 2 days later, the firm Grant and Ward collapsed entirely. Walking into the firm's Wall Street office, the former president and commanding general of the Union Army found himself with $80 in his pocket, $130 in Julia's cookie jar, and nothing else. The collapse of Grant and Ward investment firm made national headlines, partly because of who Grant was and partly because of the scale of Ward's fraud, which was staggering. Ward had extracted nearly $16.8 million from investors. That's roughly $550 million in today's money, leaving almost nothing recoverable. Thomas Nast, the cartoonist who had helped define American visual culture for a generation, lost his life savings in the same collapse. Ward was eventually tried and sentenced to 10 years at Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York. He expressed no remorse and described his operation simply as having to rob Peter to pay Paul. The Grant family had nothing. The general's cancer diagnosis arrived just a few months later, as if the year had not finished with him yet. Doctors found inoperable throat cancer in the fall of 1884, and the prognosis was clear. Months, not years. Grant was broke, he was dying, and Julia's future after he was gone was the thing that occupied him more than anything else. The mechanism that destroyed him was trust used as a weapon. His name had been so powerful that it made other people rich simply by association, and he had assumed that the trust he extended to the people around him would be honored in return. Ward had understood exactly what the Grant name was worth on Wall Street. Grant had not understood that understanding it was enough for Ward to weaponize it completely. There was still one asset left. Not money, not property, not the name on a Wall Street firm. Something else, something Ward could not touch and the cancer could not take. He had made one decision in the final months of his life that might still protect Julia. He picked up a pencil. Tomorrow, we'll finish this one. Grant is in that chair at Mount McGregor with a pencil and a deadline nobody can move. What he built in his final year, how it got to the people who needed it, and what it earned for Julia. That's all tomorrow. Don't miss it. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.